And we're off.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third session in the Creators Playground. We have Irvin representing OpenDive, who will be letting us learn more about his product. So, Irvin, please take it away.
Sure thing. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Just a second.
No worries.
Okay, let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is just a high-level keynote that I usually give when we talk about our research ongoing innovations at OpenDive Technologies. And overall, we're covering the interactions between the virtual and physical and how blockchain technology, smart contracts, and Metaverse sort of comes into play. Feel free to reach out to me at on Twitter at IrvinXYZ or at Irvin@opendive.io. So really briefly, a bit of a background. I started into crypto back in 2012, worked on Bitcoin Core, and I had a startup back then, which I later ended up selling. So from financial industry, I ended up going to academia, working on research related to what people would consider the metaverse. So my particular research focuses on immersive humanoid telepresence robots. So essentially, you can think about if you guys are in Seoul and you want to come visit me in New York, then you can connect to one of our robots that allows you to hear, see, and feel the remote environment. But besides that, within OpenDive Technologies, what we work on are technologies that allow you to consume NFTs or media more immersively. And we'll discuss more on that. And our second product is OpenAir, which is an MMORPG. And besides that, I advise and also work with a few different projects, in particular Metaplex, which is Solana's NFT standard and foundation. And also I'm a co-founder of Polka House, which is one of the largest Polkadot ecosystems overall in general. So really at a high level, like our vision within OpenAI Technologies is being able to have humanity not constrained with physical borders or living without limitations through the use of technology. And so our vision is really the vision. If you think about everyone working on emerging tech that we see nowadays, everything from blockchain tech to distributed systems to AI, it kind of surrounds this notion of being able to live without physical borders. When we look at our research in particular, we start thinking about 5 core technologies or paradigms that we're seeing emerging, right? The first one is gaming. So when we see what's happening recently with the notion of GameFi, people being able to kind of monetize gaming, and also the underlying technologies, they're quite similar to what's happening perhaps in robotics, what's happening in Internet of Things. And so from gaming, we have seen the trajectory go towards the notion of the metaverse, perhaps living in these immersive virtual worlds where you can be yourself or be whoever you want to be, take on a different identity. And so the third kind of paradigm or technology has been really around immersive reality tech and what particular people consider, for example, the Ready Player One suit or being able to kind of hear, see, and feel things in virtual worlds or perhaps in physically remote environments. And the fourth paradigm has been around the Internet of Things, ubiquitous systems and smart devices across the world, which leads us to the fifth paradigm, which is virtual and physical telepresence. And so although these kind of technologies and paradigms seem a bit bespoke, they're actually quite similar. Gaming technology was actually built upon a lot of the algorithms and notions from robotics, manipulation, trajectory planning, and so forth, and vice versa. When we look at Internet of Things, there's a lot of notions about actually network system, physical ubiquitous systems. When we look at immersive reality, there's a notion of play, immersions, and models of interactions that could be used across not only gaming, but also things like IoT devices and so forth. And so where does, the metaverse, notion of the metaverse comes into play? But really it encompasses all these things together and much more, of course. And when we think about, building towards the metaverse, a few things that we focus on are things like human factors. So being able to build with considerations for the human, When you think about gaming, you have to look into human-computer interaction. When you look at the metaverse, you have to consider things like identity, social personas. And similarly, when building interconnected devices across the world and so forth. Scalable autonomy. When people think about autonomy, they think about autonomous systems, but it's much more than that. If you think about an open metaverse, or a metaverse that is actually decentralized, you have to realize that it must be autonomous to a certain degree. It must be able to scale out or distribute itself without actually human intervention. And these concepts apply to all these other kind of paradigms. It has to be human-centric, so always considering the human. And perhaps it needs to be coactive. It needs to collaborate with other systems or allow for collaboration between humans. And then the other paradigm thing or things that we consider is, the prospects of decentralization. Because when we look at gaming or the notion of the metaverse, all these games or these products run on centralized services. What will the future look like? Will it be hosted on Google servers or Amazon servers or some streamlined infrastructure? Hopefully not. And so these are things that we consider when we look at the metaverse and so forth. And of course, there's technical implications when we look at, for example, data security, identity, reputation, provenance, and ownership. And so where does this take us in our case of our research? Well, we start looking into the notion of cyber-physical interactions. So essentially interactions that take place between intelligent computer systems and things that bridge between the physical and the virtual space. And this kind of relates to this notion of phygital, which is kind of popular now, where we have physical and digital representations, but our research encompasses that. And so one use case, for example, within our core research is fashion tech. And for the most part, fashion tech has been around for quite a few years now, essentially introducing hardware technology to wearables and so forth. But it could be more than that. You can imagine having a physical representation of a wearable also be digitally represented and perhaps tokenized in the blockchain. And perhaps this kind of wearable can allow you to not only interact with a virtual avatar, but also with a physical avatar. And so this is one of, for example, the research papers that we publish in our work with some fashion schools that allows us to design wearable technology that is able to control robots, but also able to control virtual avatars and also the introduction of blockchain technology for authentication and validity. So I'll just show a brief video and then kind of walk through. And so this is one of our earlier papers. We have a recent paper that we worked with NASA, but in this case, you could see her controlling a robot, and similarly, she's able to control a virtual avatar. And so this is what people, back in 2018, 2019 called a Ready Player One student in our case. And it's almost similar concept, except that we introduce, aspects of being able to validate and authenticate the user through blockchain tech. The future of that, for example, might be that this wearable garment is not only just physically represented and represented virtually, but perhaps it's also possible to create limited editions of it that could be 3D printed. And also perhaps this digital garment could also contain identity properties from the user that can then be used to represent an avatar in the quote unquote metaverse. But besides that, there's also other use cases that we must think of, right? And so this relates all to gaming, all to kind of identity and immersiveness in virtual worlds. But what else can we do? Well, if you think about gaming, what about combining both physical representations with virtual representations of objects or game mechanics? And then you reach this notion of the digital twin idea. And so some of the things that we explored and worked on with different foundations and ecosystems was, for example, building a robot racing game where you can have the robot race in physical space and also in virtual space. And perhaps individuals across the world can control the robots and control also the virtual versions, and perhaps they can bet on which robot will win. And so these are kind of novel interactions that we have yet to see or scale out and be considered for the metaverse. In particular, because we start reaching the notion of the digital twin, meaning having a physical version and a digital version of yourselves or any other kind of object itself. But so then this also, of course, this is in your questions when you think about what happens when the physical item ceases to exist, and so forth. And so these are just kind of like open-ended questions that we leave for you guys to think about. And so to kind of wrap up on this short kind of overview is, there's the question of how do we get there? How do we kind of create this kind of interaction between the physical and the virtual beyond just having, wearables and representation, but rather having physical interactive objects? How to reach more immersive metaverse experience or more interoperable experiences, or perhaps experiences that integrate both in the physical and the virtual and that are more decentralized. In short, there's different ways to achieve this, but the fundamental fundamentally, we need to have more scalable infrastructure. We need to have better standards to represent assets. When you think about, for example, voice-first, how do you represent this NFT across different blockchains? When you think about AI models being hosted as NFTs, and also we need more trustless middleware and services, for example, what Chainlink provides and Metaplex providing the standard itself. And perhaps we need better ways to consume the media, as we do with our wallet itself, and communities that kind of support this kind of innovation. But this is, for example, one use case that we work on being able to consume interactive dynamic media. So, for example, you consider artifacts, 3D models. Currently, they're not minted on chain, but it is possible that you can mint these things on chain and be able to wear them. So here, just quick demos of our wallets and what our wallet can do. You can display and play with your NFTs. You can wear different virtual items and so forth. But that isn't the gist. And I hope you guys had some interesting questions and enjoyed the brief talk. Thank you, guys.